Which I will be from the 50.
We'll go ahead and get started, everybody. So, first question. Who here had listening to a cowboy talk about AI on their bingo card? Nobody? I only put that on to say that. I want to start with a story real quick. My very first job, one of my very first jobs, was at the Defense Intelligence Agency as a vulnerability analyst. I knew nothing about vulnerability analysis when I started this job. I had a family friend that pulled some strings and got me in. I actually failed my interview. They asked me, do you know what vulnerability analysis is? No. Do you know what a CVE is? Nope. You start Monday. So I came in Monday. I met the team. There was 3 other vulnerability analysts and an Army Master Sergeant who was running the program. They sat me down and showed me how this worked. So this team was responsible for doing vulnerability analysis for all of the Defense Intelligence Agency offices around the world. They did this on a monthly basis. They would run scans, and the results of these scans were hundreds of megabytes of HTML files with results. They showed me that their process as a team was to transcribe these HTML files into composition notebooks. Remember composition notebooks, the speckled black and white things in elementary school? So the challenge here was that there are 3 separate, not connected networks at DIA: unclassified, secret, top secret. And there wasn't a really good way back then, to push hundreds of megabytes of data between these networks very easily, especially on a repeated basis. So this was the solution: is we write this stuff down, write the unclassified network stuff down in the book, the CVE, the host name, and then we go up to the top secret network and we type it into Excel. This was what they did for the entire month. And at the end of the month, they would produce some reporting from the Excel files, and then they would kick off a scan and start over. So it took them a couple hours to kind of show me this. He gives me a stack of government-provided composition notebooks, a fistful of government-provided pins, and sits me in a cubicle at the end of the row. I very quickly walk over to him and I'm like, hey, I watched your process. We can automate this. We can do this way faster. And he says, who do you think you are? Number one, you're the brand new kid in the office. You don't even know what this is. Shut up and color. So I said, okay. So I went and sat in my cubicle. I didn't write anything in the notebooks. Part of the reason I think I'm standing here today is because I spent my first 3 days in this office writing a Visual Basic script that iterated through these files, scraped all the content out, and dumped it automatically into an Excel file. That Excel file was much smaller, and we could actually push it through the diode up the networks. I was so excited. 4th day, I call the guy back over, and I say, look what I've done. I automated this process. It took 4 people total, an entire month to do what I just did in 12 minutes. I did all of the analysis. I was so proud, smiling ear to ear, thinking I had just done an amazing thing. He was pissed. He was so upset. He was about to retire. He told me that I was supposed to do it his way. You know, insubordination, apparently that's a thing in the military. I didn't listen to the instruction. I tell you this story to tell you that I have a very intimate connection with automation at a very young age. And this left a really impressionable mark on me. I was very quickly running that team as he retired. And we ended up developing that script. We maintained it for a couple of years, and we actually automated that whole process. We're able to do some really amazing things to modernize that office. So that leads me into why I'm up here talking about automation, especially for cybersecurity and compliance. So we talked a little bit earlier about how compliance is changing as a result of all of these cool technologies and all of the awesome things that we've talked about here this morning. Copilot for security, Purview, Azure policy. We're going from this being an entirely manual process to getting to where it's really very little manual process. I'm sure everybody in here, I think I may ask this question earlier, has been frustrated by that week of chaos prior to an assessment, of getting all your stuff ready, getting your screenshots, getting your Excel files. It's always an Excel file. Getting your Excel files updated. And we're getting to a place where we can now do continuous compliance monitoring. So Purview has a compliance portal built into it. Purview has all of these access to all of these things around your data, your permissions. Azure policy as well has the ability to standardize policies for things like deploying virtual machines and storage resources and user accounts, where you can force them to have a specific type of policy applied to them, that they're encrypted, that they are, have certain role-based access applied to them. Microsoft Sentinel also has compliance workbooks that's collecting this data and providing evidence and actionable information. And so we no longer have to do the mad dash. If we have a question about where we are compliance-wise in the middle of the year or 2 weeks after we did the assessment, we now have a really easy way to go find out without having to make a bunch of people jump through hoops and waste a lot of precious time. So continuous compliance monitoring is another one of these automation capabilities that we have to make all of our lives easier and to make what we're doing less prone to human error. So some real world examples here. The continuous configuration drift, and Anthony, you brought this question up earlier about having some config drift and being able to identify stuff like that. Using some of these tools that are available in your Microsoft tenant, things you may have licensed already today, but you're not using to their maximum potential, can help keep an eye on these things. Using Copilot for security as an example, you can ask questions about where am I out of compliance with certain standards? Where are things that I can, what are things that I can do to increase my compliance with, pick your thing here. Dashboards and dynamic reporting are another great visual that a lot of us don't have access to today. And using these tools gives us that access. That information is pure power. So I wanted to ask you, Beth, as somebody who's been doing compliance for a very long time, you've seen many of these scrambles, probably hundreds of thousands of these Excel files. Can you talk a little bit about how you see this changing today and what you think that means from a compliance standpoint?
That's a pretty broad question.
Pick your favorite. That's it.
I think that, there's a lot of discussion about the need and want to go to automation. And one of the things that I'm constantly preaching or annoying people about is you still have to have your documented, repeatable process first. Because if, let's say, all of us were on a team in this room and all of us had to go and run a vulnerability scan, how are each of you going to approach it? How are you going to do it? Think about how you get up in the morning every day. And you've got maybe it down to a science that it takes you exactly 30 minutes to wake up, shower, brush your teeth, do all those things. And it's repeatable every morning, same thing. But now everybody here in the room probably gets ready differently. So without a documented, repeatable process, it's very difficult to automate that. Anthony, you might take 30 minutes. Sarah might take an hour and a half. Diana might take 20 minutes. Sorry, Sarah. But we all have to be here, present, ready to present at 9 a.m. We all have different commutes. It's different. So I really stress that and still maintain the perspective that you have to have clearly documented processes and procedures that are repeatable, because it allows you to see what the outliers are a little bit easier. And it allows you to be able to then focus on and home in on the things that are probably important. Not that you brush your teeth every day, but suddenly it took you 30 minutes longer. Why? What happened? And you're suddenly late. Funnily enough, this weekend, my best friend of a long time, she's always late to everything, drives me up a wall. And I live in Luckett's, which is pretty far out there. She lives 30 minutes closer to where we were going to be. We needed to meet at 9 a.m. and I have my grandbaby. He's 17 months old and he needed to eat. We were meeting at Cracker Barrel, going to go to the Christmas market. Sorry, this is a long conversation here. But she gets there and she's an hour and a half late. And I'm like, you didn't have a baby. You didn't have to wait in the Cracker Barrel line like I did. I not only waited in the line, I got there on time, waited in the line, ordered my food. Our food arrived and she finally got there. And she's like, I'm like, what did you do? She's like, I don't know. I just did the normal stuff I did. I'm like, I don't think that's true. She's like, it took me an hour and a half. How was that possible? Your hair is like this short. And ultimately, she piddles. She kind of roams around and she doesn't realize she did. She has waste, right? But if she had a repeatable process, being able to produce the stuff consistently is important. And so using that to set up your continuous monitoring, to set up the automation, I think is really critical. Otherwise, you may have still inconsistent results.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So let's talk a little bit about real-time policy enforcement. So as Beth mentioned, really important to have a written policy, but we can now also do automated enforcement of that policy. So it has to start with that, but we can use technology to help us. So with real-time policy enforcement, there's a lot of tools from Azure policy continuous assessments to conditional access policies that can help us ensure that the things that we're doing are repeatable and consistent and aligned with our written policy. Defender for Cloud and Intune, another way to extend those policies all the way down to the endpoints, both mobile and physical. So Azure policy is really your first line of defense. And this is the guardrail that tries to keep you in line with the broader level policies that you want to have for your security configuration. Defender for Cloud takes that even further by extending that into your workload protection. So there's a lot of aspects of Azure and the Azure workload that are covered under Defender for Cloud, and we can enforce those things there as well.
And might I say, with compliance, there is, the requirement of, documenting what you do and then doing what you say you're going to do, and that has to align. And so if you have different folks running different things and that doesn't align, they all have to marry up together.
Right. Yeah. And policy as code is a great way to ensure that no matter which admin is creating a resource, that is inheriting a policy that is consistent with what you're doing. So how does this really manifest in some tangible numbers? Doing real-time policy enforcement reduces your errors and your policy violations by about 90%. That's huge. 75% faster deployments because we're standardizing the way we're deploying, and a huge reduction in config drift because we've established what that configuration and those policy guardrails are, and near zero human error because we're not relying on the human to remember which boxes to check and which things to enforce. So this is a force multiplier, again, as we've been talking about all morning. So streamlined auditing and reporting. I talked about this a little bit earlier. As you're going through an audit, as you're preparing for an audit, having a dashboard, having a view of what you're compliant with, which areas are green, which areas are red is typically how the Excel files work. Having that visibility is often, again, limited to Excel. But now we have some tools that can give us this insight into all of your workforce here in Purview, in Sentinel. And having this view, again, allows you to keep an eye on things as you're progressing through the year, instead of having it be that scramble later on. And being able to detect drift or problems early. So again, that we're not risking missing our auditing deadline because something is drastically out of whack and we need to fix it. So streamlined auditing and reporting, automating the documentation portion of this, the evidence collection for your workflows. How many people here have, I'm sure you probably still have them on your laptops, folders of screenshots for your last audits of things that you needed to submit. We probably, a lot of us probably still have those things. If we can automate the evidence collection, if we have maybe 1 or 2 places to go to collect the majority of this stuff, this is a faster turnaround time. It's less stress on the staff. 70% reduction in audit preparation time. 85% faster to collect the evidence if the system's doing most of it for you and putting it all in one place. And then a drastic reduction in audit costs, right? All of that time people have spent doing the manual processes cost you money. It's time they could be doing other things, especially if you have an outside firm that's helping with some of these things. And then you're continuously ready, right? If you're monitoring these things, if you're staying up to date with them, if you have all of these checks and balances, ensuring that you aren't drifting wildly out of scope, you're continuously ready for an assessment. Now, incident response automation, this is one of the things I could probably talk all day about. And there's some really, really neat things that we're doing with Azure Sentinel and with automated playbooks. So predefined playbooks that can take action based on certain types of incidents. We can do real-time containment. We have kind of a complicated workflow that we do today. Business email compromise, still one of the top incidents that our SOC deals with across our client base. We have automated playbooks that can detect business email compromise very quickly. And then we actually have a prescribed set of steps that we take after that detection. We build confidence levels along the way here in our playbook to make sure that we're not accidentally following this process where we don't need to. But our first step is to look at where this user's logins are coming from. Business email compromise almost always means there's going to be a login that doesn't belong. We can do assessment on where this user's logged in from in the last 30 days. Is this IP or location been a place where this person has logged in before? Are they on a device that is registered in Intune and that we know about? If not, we now have a high degree of confidence something is not right with this account, and we can proceed to the next step. Next step is locking that user's account. The next step is revoking all of their sessions, because if the bad guy has gotten into the account, just because we lock it doesn't stop the bad activity. We need to revoke those sessions in order to stop that. That's an API call right there. Next, we force reset the password, and we can now automatically create a ticket to the help desk, because there's going to be an angry user that can't log into their account pretty soon. And the help desk needs to know what's going on so that they can help that user get their password reset and get back to work. So these automated response workflows have now taken something that historically would take an analyst maybe 5 to 15 minutes to notice, maybe another 5 to 15 to investigate, maybe another 5 to remediate. And then, maybe 20 or 30 minutes to write it all up and get the ticket to the help desk. So we've taken this 30 to 45 minute process. We can do this in under a minute at machine speed. Now, in a business email compromise, speed is really key. Ransomware, same thing. Speed is key. The longer you let that dwell, the more bad can happen. And so this is a real boon to security analysts, and Copilot is going to take this to the next level. From a detection and analysis perspective, the SOAR capabilities that are built into Sentinel that are available in the platform means we can do even more across the infrastructure. We can touch almost all the other pieces of the Microsoft and Azure environment and make some really cool integrations across everything that's running. So what does this mean? Looking at a ransomware response use case here, 2 minutes to detection, 5 to containment, 15 to reporting, and 60 to full resolution. This stuff can take hours or days if done manually. And if you can shut down ransomware in single-digit minutes, you can save a ton of money, ton of time, ton of effort, and potentially a client, you can save a ton of heartache, right? Hopefully there's backups. So transforming compliance through automation. A reduction in manual compliance tasks here is again, that's money. Time is money. Faster incident response means a happier client, means less damage, means less to clean up. 60% audit or decrease in audit cost is, again, talking directly to money. All of these automations are saving us time and money, making us faster, making us cheaper, making us more extensible. And then some key implementation steps here. Assessing your current compliance posture is really, I think, important if we're going to go into automation. Understanding where you're at, where you want to go, the frameworks that you need to be compliant with. And then identifying automation opportunities is the next place. With all of this stuff, it's about having a plan. It's about understanding how you're going to implement these things, even with Copilot and Copilot for security. As you've heard, I think twice today, don't just roll it out to everybody all at once. Have a plan for it. Understand how this is going to interact. Scalable compliance programs. This is something I would like to ask you about. From a scalable compliance program, there are more and more compliance standards that are coming out, which means ultimately more work for everybody. What are some things that you think automation can help with as getting into continuous compliance, as well as having scalable programs?
So we'll talk about this in the next session some about Sean is laughing. There is a lot of the standards have a lot of commonality amongst them, and the compliance teams are typically trying to figure out what those commonalities are and building them into their worksheets. There's a lot of tools out there that are supposed to help do that alignment, and even with the Defender for Cloud.
Purview's got.
Yeah. The Defender, and I think that you talked to me about the Defender for Cloud, I think, right? Yeah. That has the automated, it will tell you for ISO, it's this, for NIST, it's this, for that is this, and these are the controls that map together. You know, doing this for 30 years, we've built up a lot of spreadsheets, yes, and processes and assets that are best in class. Our assets that we've developed over the years are already integrated. So whether you're going to go after an ISO certification or standard or CMMI or NIST, we've integrated a lot of those policies and processes and procedures, even our Excel spreadsheets. And what we have found, unfortunately, with a lot of the tools out there, they have NIST, they might have ISO, they don't have CMMI. They're like, how do you spell that? And, oh, it's on the plan in the future. And for us, it's often easier to use our Excel spreadsheets because they are already integrated so heavily. Maybe I should just start a software company, Rob. Just kidding.
Buy one.
But there are pieces of it that can be automated. And I think what you're talking about, Jones, is the technical controls for a lot of the standards that are written in written policy, that are put and implemented through technological controls. That's where some of that automation can really happen. And you know, looking at what the business requirements are, the frequency of things, and the risk tolerance of an organization. You still need the people, unfortunately, or fortunately, and you still need that interaction. But from a scalability perspective, it would be great if even more compliance standards are combined. We have clients that also need PCI and HIPAA, and many of you guys need multiple of those standards, PCI and HIPAA and ISO and CMMI, and trying to do the work of the commonality and understanding the common controls across each of the standards can help you check the box off a little bit easier. So.
Got a question. And it's a Beth. So, I mean, in your years of experience, do you find it super or just difficult to really get your senior leadership in any organization? I'm not talking about FR3, I'm talking about when you go to a company, just say AP. So you go to senior leadership to buy in, really when it comes to this compliance, because like, we were talking about FinOps. That's been a major initiative. But FinOps, the way it works is if you don't get your finance department and your leadership, other leadership areas to get involved in it, you're not really operating within a FinOps principle or mindset, right? So in your experience, can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what are some of these companies doing to get that buy-in from the top?
So I'm going to answer that with a story again, once again. So I worked at a company and the IT department, we had on-prem servers, and they kept going to the CFO and the CEO and saying, we need more servers. We're running out of space. We're running out of space. They didn't bring anything visually to the table. And everybody at R3 knows I have to visually see something. I can't, I can't just hear it because it's like almost like a learning thing. Like I have to see something. But executives and other leaders are often similar. They need the colors. They need it sweet and simple. And so I said, okay, IT department, did you present? Oh yeah, we've been telling them. Show me what you've been giving them. Well, we've just been telling them. Okay, well, you want $250,000 to get a new server. You need to show something that is meaningful to the stakeholders that you are talking to. So I want you to put together a capacity trending of all of the servers and color code it. And let's do a threshold. 0 to 50% might be green, and 51 to 70% is yellow, and 71% to 100 is red. So they did that and they presented and they gave it to me the day of the management review board. Okay. Well, you've got Dopey 123 server. You've got 56.2.54. Whatever server. And you've got, I don't know, Star Wars 27 over here. And what does that mean? So I said, let's put some context to that data. In ITIL, there's a concept of data, putting some context around that becomes information. And then the people in the room with the knowledge and experience gives you that knowledge and enables you to make wise decisions or wiser decisions. Not everybody is going to get on board, but you got to speak to their language. So the very next meeting, I said, well, before the next meeting, I said, change all those server names to what they actually mean. So the finance Deltek server at 97% capacity, red, month over month. What do you think happened when we went to the CFO with that color-coded Deltek server at 97% capacity? He yells, why are my servers red? We need this to expand this. Okay, where's the dotted line for the check? So you have to get to the point where you know your audience and what is important to them. Also, in my experience, that sometimes the technical folks are, have a harder time getting on board with process because they just want to go in and do it. Sometimes you have to slap them with the regulation. Our cyber insurance, this has to be done. You're going to lose contracts. You're going to lose finance. You're going to spend money here, or you're going to lose money here. You're going to get breached. But sometimes they need the hard lesson. And it isn't until the things you've been talking about actually happen that they ultimately get on board. So they have to realize the value. And sometimes forcing that compliance, we're going to meet every quarter and we're going to go and review this. And eventually they say, oh, that information is useful. Oh, that makes sense. The people that were the biggest people that were the most against what you were trying to implement end up becoming your staunchest supporters later on. And this has genuinely happened in the 30 years that I've experienced, time after time after time.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Awesome. With that, we're done.
That was easy.
Any
Question?
questions? Yeah. Any questions about anything we just saw? That was a great question, Anthony. And it's always about framing the risk and the reward to the right people. And so, looking at how much money does an audit cost you? If you can save money in that process and have an even more accurate result, that is a great way to present that data to encourage upper management to start looking at how do we automate some of these things? How do we integrate these things we're probably already paying for to help us out?
Understanding the pain point. What keeps you up at night? Stakeholder ABC. What are you worried about? And then that's what you come to them with. Framing your report, your stance in a way that they can understand a little bit more. I didn't come at you guys today with compliance and start talking through all the controls because that is boring. Nobody wants to talk about that all day long. But making it a fun and interesting story that is relatable, resonates a little bit more.
Got a few for you.
Some attendee submitted ones. We touched on this one a little bit. Maybe we can expand. What challenges? I've got this one. What challenges or limitations should organizations anticipate when implementing advanced security automation within GCC High? And are there any compliance concerns specific to federal agencies?
I'll take this from a technical implementation and I will let you handle the compliance side of that one. So, as we have talked about earlier today, not everything that's available on the commercial side is available in GCC and GCC High. So there are certainly some considerations to think of there. A real world example of this, while Microsoft has an enormous corpus of information in their threat database, I think Carly, the number was 78 trillion a day. Is that accurate? Yeah, 78 trillion data points a day. But there are other threat intelligence providers that can provide things. So in a GCC High environment, for example, there isn't the ability to pull this stuff from the commercial internet. So that was actually at a prior place I was at. We had this process developed on the commercial side where we were leveraging another premium threat intelligence provider, and we could use API calls to pull all this data in. And as we started getting into GCC High deployments, we couldn't do that anymore. And so that's certainly something to think about is the boundary is there for a very specific reason. And there, not everything you can do in that commercial side works. So you really have to think it out as you're creating or planning for stuff in GCC High to make sure that you aren't leveraging commercial components that are not available and ensuring that all of the components that you are using are actually active and available in the GCC High environment.
Tim, I know that question came from you. Is there anything you wanted to expand upon or get clarification on for that question?
Not to put you on the spot.
You can always put me on the spot now. Just slap it around later on. Sean, did you want to add anything to that answer?
Part of the compliance part of this.
Or this? Yeah.
No, I mean, the migration requires planning. That's really what it comes down to. And, I've had clients that want to go GCCI because they were told to. And so blindly, they're like, okay, let's go get pricing and put this in place and realize really soon, not only is it very, very expensive, but that migration doesn't happen. The compliance controls are going to be the same regardless of which area you're in. So matching them up is just a matter of going through the exercise. The controls that he's talking about really matter because I may have different procedures in that migration that changes the way we do things. So it's not just meeting the controls. It's the procedures on how I meet those controls.
Well, you know what I also find when I'm talking to clients, just backing it up on the regulatory part, the regulations that the federal government is requiring, the answer isn't so simple on which environment you need to have. And often the stakeholders that come to me do not understand what they actually need. So when I ask the question to them, do your contracts, are you ITAR? Which has a very specific, or no foreign, which means no foreign folks at all can be touching that environment. And so with that, it's like go straight to GCC high automatically. Don't pass go, don't collect that money, go straight over to jail. Versus, maybe the contracts, if you're doing any DoD work, NIST 800 171 DFARS is required. And there are federal agencies beyond that are saying NIST 800 171. They're saying ISO. Sometimes they don't even know what they're talking about. And they list 500 different standards in a contract that you have to comply with and have no relevance to the work that's even being performed. And how are you going to get them FedRamped plus CMMC plus ISO certification plus, PCI over here plus this and that? And it doesn't have any relevance. So, oftentimes these stakeholders, when I say, okay, what are your regulations? They often don't know. What's in your contracts? I don't know. So you'll have to speak out to your operations delivery folks, your proposal managers and proposal team to get that insight, your contracts managers to know and understand what that is, to decide what you even need to implement to begin with. So the challenges are going to be based on what are your requirements, plan. Part of planning is finding out what your actual requirements are and then trying to implement that plan.
Anything, Dad? Did you say you something bad?
But I did wanna actually just add a couple visuals, I guess, with it. So when talking about the different, clouds and compliance, I think a couple of those questions came up. I have a couple visuals to help share that, but also, fastest way to get C-suite buy-in, fail an audit. I promise you, I did an assessment. They first failed assessment. I was like, we didn't even have a process for if somebody fails yet. And how fast their IT department got money to implement the things because they're like, well, we don't understand IT and there's all these tools and this, that. I'm like, trust the people or hire somebody to come in and give you the advice. But you're not doing it. So like, I can't let you pass. And so they then got money to buy the tools that they needed and other things. And
Yeah, like speaks that way.
yeah,
So the issue with failing that from a compliance team, and Stacy, I'm sure you can probably appreciate this, is that it becomes Beth's process, not the organization's process. Being the enforcer of you got to put this policy in place, you got to put that policy in place, you have to do this activity, you have to do that activity. Well, Beth said we had to do so. It's not me that's saying that we have to do so. It's not my process. It's the business's process. It is the organization's process that you have to comply with as a standard. But unfortunately, we don't pass an audit, and guess who's going to be in trouble? Beth. So again, going back to the business has to own this compliance. They have to really embrace this as a way of life. So, that's all I want to say about that.
no,
Yeah.
definitely. And I mean, it's one of those things I tell people as they're, like we said earlier, do you want contracts with the government? Do you want contracts with the Army? Then you have to have CMMC level 2 certification soon. So that's just going to be the way of life. We're not in this limbo phase anymore. So figure it out. But so when it comes to like the different clouds, how do I determine which one? It's all about the information. We talk about data a bunch of times. And so this is this is kind of a, basically all the different kind of offerings that Microsoft has. So if you look at it, I kind of like to look at it in 3 different levels. You've got your Office, your M365 that we like to talk about. you've got your Azure component. And so then you also have your dynamics, so your Power Platform and all of that. So when you're looking at compliance or what area is going to be what, you're looking at those three things. And so like we have our GCC, which sits on Azure Commercial, because it is IL2, Impact Level 2, which is the Disha Cloud. Impact levels. So the information is going to be probably your CUI basic, maybe. It's not going to be your CUI specified, not ETAR, not ITAR. So it's all about what information is going to be there when you or your customers are determining which cloud you're going to be in. So if you're going to have CUI, if you're going to have UNNPI, if you're going to have ETAR or ITAR, you're going to want to go into that impact level 4, which is basically the government did not want for DoD, they said no contractors will be on IL5, so that's what IL4 is. It is IL5 like. So typically, if it comes to GCC high, it then rolls out to IL5, but those both sit on Azure Government. So when we're talking about the co-pilots, it is an Azure OpenAI, which while that is in both, there's still the accreditation process for everything it connects to for where it's getting that information and how it operates. And so that's when you look at from a compliance standpoint, what cloud you need to be in. That's kind of a visual. And then when you look to, well, what does Microsoft already compliant with? From an M365, I also have one of these for Azure, because again, they're two different packages. So this is how the M365s meet the different levels of requirements that you might have to meet or that you would need to know for when you get assessed or when any of your customers get assessed. Now I will address the equivalent elephant in the room. GCC High is not yet fully FedRAMP marketplace. It's a whole paperwork shuffle that we are fighting with the PMO office for, but it is equivalent. We have the body of evidence. The body of evidence requirement thing was something that was new that came out in December. Now we have always said M365 commercial is FedRAMP equivalent. We have said it, it has not necessarily been in the marketplace, but because of when you look down at this customer support, that worldwide people, again, it's a people thing. You don't know who you're getting. To be FedRAMPed, it has a requirement of being US persons. So when this equivalency memo came out in December, requiring a body of evidence, which also requires like proving all of these things, while we still are equivalent, we do not maintain a body of evidence for the M365 commercial. So that is why that had to be removed. People were in uproar. They were like, they tore it out under the rug. They didn't tell us that this happened. I was like, it's never been in the marketplace. Never. But because all of our products, our offerings, our services are all built with the 853 as the baseline, they're all going to be equivalent in some manner. But whether we have the 3PAO and the body of evidence and maintain it, that's a paperwork shuffle that we did not want to do for commercial. So that is why now we do not say that commercial is equivalent because of those new requirements. So, and then when it comes to like the Azure commercial, nope, where'd it go? The slide was there and now it's gone. Well, Azure falls into the same way. What? The
Do
monkey?
you think they'll ever do the BOE for commercial again or no?
I don't know.
So many people depended on that equivalency, you know?
Right, but commercial should not be having CUI.
Correct.
But for
There was people that were actually layered on top of that now they can't have downloads to the desktop because of that, right?
yeah, so I don't know. Rumor has it there's going to be some changes to the FedRAMP PMO office and the FedRAMP process.
There are, because
So once we get those changes, and yes, I mean, the changes are happening.
Yeah.
What the changes exactly are, I've only heard rumors.
Yeah.
But equivalency is probably going away. But what does that mean for yes, no marketplace? Hopefully that means it's easier. I say easier, meaning things will go faster. But, and then we talk about, when we talk about the compliance and they talk about, that's not the thing I want. They were talking about compliance manager, defender for cloud, and everything else. We talk about the shared responsibility. So depending on what information or how much Microsoft you have, will determine the inheritance that you get from our SSP, our FedRAMP package, our the customer responsibility matrix. So the more you have, the less work you have to do because you just inherit it from Microsoft or you inherit it from your managed solution provider. Rob's word, solution, not service. So the more work, that's the inheritance. And so, but when you get completely on-prem, then you have to do everything. From the physical security to the maintenance, etc. So the more you have, and then with Compliance Manager, with Defender for Cloud, with our body of evidence, it breaks it down what that shared responsibility is, and you can extract that to then put into your SSP because it'll tell you, and it's continually updating and monitoring the Microsoft portions. So you can extract that information and use it in your body of evidence because as an assessor, the first thing you're gonna ask, where's Microsoft responsibility end and yours begin? This tells you. And so you can then use that information. It was something that when I came to Microsoft, I was like, does anybody know this exists? I mean, they do now, but for like 2, 3, 4 years ago, people did not know about Compliance Manager and the cool things that it provided. I was like, as an assessor, that would have been great. As a small company doing these assessments, that would have been awesome as well for them to maintain. So it's figuring out what your inheritance is, and these tools can help you with that, as well as the documentation that you get access to once you have your subscription. That was all I had to add. Thank you.
Where are we with